This recording was produced by the Savanna Institute and funded by a grant from the USDA SARE program. You'll be hearing a conversation between aspiring silvopasturist Jared Dressman and silvopasture expert Darren Bender-Beauregard of Brambleberry Farm in southern Indiana. You can find more silvopasture resources at savannainstitute.org.
So I'm working with the Savanna Institute, and they're wanting to interview some silvopasture experts, and your name came up as somebody to interview, and so basically I was looking at your website a little bit. If you could just basically introduce yourself and your farm, and maybe just start by talking a little bit about your farm and your location and things and some different things like that.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I'd be happy to. So our farm, Brambleberry Farm, we started in the fall of 2003. My wife's parents, and it's in southern Indiana. They're about an hour northwest of Louisville, Kentucky, and an hour south of Bloomington, Indiana. So we're right on the very edge of the Hoosier National Forest. It's a very hill and valley topography. We're on a ridge top, and so we have fairly eroded ridge top soils that are fairly heavy clay. I think we're in zone 6B hardiness zone technically, though I think with polar vortex and everything, it's like not that clear that that's a defined thing anymore. But my wife's parents bought property there in the 70s, kind of as part of the back to land movement, kind of tried their hand at that. Didn't work out so well, but they kept their acreage that was open, bush hogged, once a year or so. And my wife and I, when we decided we wanted to start our own farm, asked them if they'd be open to us moving there and working with the land. They were pretty excited about that, and so that's where we've been working ever since. And it's on the ridge top. So we have a little very slight south slope and very slight north slope that then kind of drops off kind of sharply sloped into the woods. And we've kept the steeper slopes all in woods. They were already woods, and we figured that keeping them wooded would be the best thing for erosion prevention and that kind of thing. So we only have probably about 7 or 8 open acres, and then probably about double that wooded. And then the woods are all on the north side of our property, so it gives us really nice solar gain. And it's kind of a long, skinny property running east to west, so it's kind of an ideal solar location for getting good sun to things. We started out by growing vegetables for market with a no-till sheet mulch system on about 3/4 of an acre. Had a really small CSA, and but we planted fruit trees and berries our very first year because we knew that was something we wanted to move into and not do vegetable growing for the rest of our lives, for obvious reasons if you've ever grown vegetables for market. So it's a lot of work, and I mean it's good quick cash and fairly steady and fairly straightforward, but we both had worked on farms previously as interns and whatnot, and we both knew that wasn't something we wanted to just be our end game. So we started out our plantings. We kind of did more more by the book permaculture food forest kind of thing with them, and didn't really plan in any real specific single rows of trees that would be easy to manage with a bush hog or fencing or that kind of things. We were sort of, I don't know what the right word to be gentle about it is, but kind of pie in the sky kind of mentality, and thought we should just do everything by hand and not use machinery. And I mean, that's a great goal and things, but wasn't very realistic in hindsight. So those trees that we planted our first year, most of them survived, did really well, and I enjoyed tending them and learning to prune and that sort of thing. But I taught myself how to graft the following year because I realized how expensive it was to buy a lot of trees, already grafted from nurseries. And I learned very little bit about grafting in college. And I just said, I could probably find a way to get rootstock for fairly cheap. And my friends have all these great apple and peach and pear varieties that I wanted to get. And I could just order rootstock and, try my hand at grafting. And so I did, and I had pretty good luck and was able to plant out, a whole bunch more trees on our property over the years, just from, paying a couple bucks a piece for rootstock. And meanwhile, we were also reproducing our berries from cuttings and from tip roots and divisions and that sort of thing. And so we were kind of in I guess, unintentionally teaching ourselves to run a nursery. And so we started taking, we were mostly, propagating plants for our own use in the beginning. And then we started taking, once we had all the plants we needed and planted them out, we were like, well, we're already selling vegetables at the farmer's market. Why don't we start a bunch of gooseberries and blackberries and raspberries and all these things in pots and see if, we could take them with us and sell them throughout the season alongside our produce. So we did that, and it went really well, and people really enjoyed talking to us. Spent most of the time at market just talking to people and answering questions about growing perennial food plants. And we kind of realized I really enjoyed that, and slowly realized we were making more money from selling the plants than we were from the produce. And I don't know, at some point it just started shifting where we realized at some point too, we started advertising on Craigslist and with our plants and sort of saying that we had this nursery and people could come make appointments and come buy plants. And people kind of trickled out and bought stuff, and we slowly were able to just drop our annual produce growing altogether and move into what we have now as pretty much our primary farm enterprise is nursery stock. We sell potted fruit, nut, and berry plants from our farm. We don't really go to any farmers markets anymore. People have just by word of mouth mostly, because we haven't done any formal advertising. We've stopped posting on Craigslist just because we don't really need to anymore. And I don't know, we've just kind of grown a little following in our region, and people come out year after year. They like our plants. They do well for them, and they like being able to ask questions and get sort of free advice on how to grow the things that they're buying from someone who's actually grown them before. So it's turned into just a really great kind of niche market enterprise that is just working amazingly well for us, and something that my wife and I both love to do. And people seem to love what we do and like to come out and support it. From a Silvopasture standpoint, we started out our farming as a lot of young vegetable farmers have. Is we were vegetarian, not strict vegetarians, but it was kind of this ideal that don't have to kill animals and all this stuff. And so we didn't really have animals much in our plans in the very beginning, and that's probably partly why we planted this kind of food forest that was kind of a thicket and not really well thought out about mowing it with tractors or that kind of thing if we needed to, or fencing animals into it. So we did want to have chickens because we wanted to have eggs to eat for a good, very cheap and easy protein source, and we let our chickens raise their own babies. And we kind of realized that first year that, well, we have all these male chicks, and what are we going to do with them? And so we were like, well, we could drop them off in the woods and let the coyotes eat them, or we could raise them up and just say, well, maybe we're going to have a little bit of meat if it's our own chickens, and we butcher them ourselves and that kind of thing. So we did that and butchered our own cockerels, and it felt really good. It was like, we're part of this animal's life, and it had a really good life, and it's really good quality protein. And, we were part of its, birth and its death, and just seemed like it felt really good to us. So we grew a few more batches of chickens. We never get into the big pastured poultry thing at all to sell meat birds to people, but more for our own use. And then we decided to add some pigs, and we got into American guinea hogs, which were extremely rare breed when we got into them. It was we kind of fell into some breeding stock from a guy. I never heard of him before, and did pastured pigs, rotated on a pasture that we had, and sold breeding stock of those and did pretty well with that for a while, and then also sold pork. I had pork for our own freezer as well. And then at some point I stumbled onto Mark Shepard's work and was just like, wow. I mean, this is just like the single rows of trees on contour, and having alleys that were multifunctional. They could either be pasture, or they could be tilled up and grow vegetables or whatever on them. It just kind of all. It was weird. It wasn't. I mean, that was back when it's like didn't have Pinterest, didn't have anything to just look up these amazing lots and lots and lots and lots of endless pictures of certain people's farms that you can do now. It was just, I think he had posted some pictures from his, he had done a farm scale permaculture course for a number of years. And it was just one set of pictures from one of those courses, I think. And it just showed pictures from around his farm. And so I didn't even know what his whole plan, his whole strategy and stuff was. But all I saw was these single rows of trees on contour with alleys between them. And I had read about agroforestry and stuff before, and alley cropping, and it was just like, man, why did I not get this the first time that, you plant trees in single rows that are easy to manage with a tractor on either side if you need to, and that you have these wide spaces between them that you can either use for pasture or for growing other things. And so, I set up my own sort of system that way, just kind of roughly based on what I saw from his pictures. And we had a 3.5 acre pasture that was extremely stripped from, most likely from overhaying, people just taking hay off year after year after year, 3 crops a year, and just taking almost all the phosphorus and sulfur and micronutrients out of the soil. And it's just kind of turned to broom sedge, which is kind of an indicator here in our region of really poor soils that have been stripped. It's gotten really acidic, low phosphorus, low calcium. And so we had been grazing our pigs there and some chickens and things, just try and slowly, add some fertility back to it. And, from the permaculture kind of background, more traditional, I guess, I call it book permaculture. We'd read all this stuff about, just if you mulch and apply lots of, compost and just, graze well, all these things will all these new deficiencies in your soil will just magically disappear. And so soil tests are dumb, and you don't have to worry about soil tests because you just mulch and everything will be okay. And I mean, we weren't mulching our 3.5 acre pasture, but it was just sort of at some point I realized I should take a soil test. And when I saw that our phosphorus was in the single digits, and pH was 5.3 and 5.4 and stuff, it was like, man, I really need to do something. So, but anyway, we planted. That's kind of, I guess, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But this 3.5 acre pasture, I kind of was playing with different designs for it based on what I saw from Mark's stuff, and I ended up just figuring out that a 60-foot spacing between tree rows was going to be a good, and having tree rows just run straight north and south. I hadn't really picked up on Mark's running the trees on contour. The pictures that I saw didn't necessarily show top view of his farm or anything. And so I wasn't doing anything on contour, and I would kick myself for a long time afterwards for not doing that. But at this point, it's kind of settled out, and I'm feeling okay about what we're doing, even though it's not perfect. But But we set the rows straight north and south because I knew traditionally orchards were planted north and south so that there'd be equal light shed on both sides of the tree canopies, and you'd get good coloration on the fruit and that sort of thing. So they're running north and south, and then it's a single row of trees, and then there's 60 feet of pasture in between each. And then we have a lane going down the middle of this field that's, fairly rectilinear. It's not perfect, but which divides the pasture into like 12 roughly quarter-acre paddocks. And so we then, we were moving the pigs through the system, and I then got some sheep, and I was using electric net fence to run sheep and pigs, and then some geese actually in rotation through this very, very young silvopasture that we had planted. And I put down some soft rock phosphate and gypsum and some zinc sulfate and some other things to sort of ameliorate the soil deficiency that I saw in the soil test that we did. And so I'm sorry if I'm getting way too in detail here for you.
No, this is great.
Is it good? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm about at the end here, so and so it was really interesting. We had tried to frost seed all kinds of different clover species and some grass species into our pasture for years and years and years. And we'd see a little bit of kind of baby clovers pop up, but nothing really seemed to take very well. And this is all before we took soil tests and stuff, and it was just kind of like, well, that doesn't really work that well. Maybe someday we should rent a drill and have them drilled in or something. And I didn't know at the time that, you really need to have ample phosphorus and calcium to get clovers to, take well. And it was kind of crazy. So the year that I spread the gypsum and soft rock phosphate and some micronutrients, I spread them on like a 10-foot wide swath on either side of the tree rows, just because, we've been operating on a fairly on a shoestring like a lot of small farms do. We're not like in debt or anything, but we have to be somewhat careful about how much money we spend on things. And so I was like, I can afford to buy, a pallet load of stuff to ameliorate the soil on a 10-foot wide swath on either side of the tree rows, because I wanted to focus on the trees, making sure they were healthy and had what they needed to resist pests and diseases and that sort of thing. And so I spread on either side of these tree rows. And later that summer, maybe even spring, but I think later that summer, I didn't plant any new clovers or anything, but it's like I went out and like one day realized that there was these just dark green belts that were exactly at that 10-foot spread mark that I had put this nutrient down at. And I realized that all these clovers had come up, and they were all the clovers that we had planted. We had, ladino clover and alsite clover and some red clovers, and it was like, holy cow. So that seed had been like lying dormant, or there were tiny seedlings just staying teeny tiny, waiting for the nutrients they needed. And all of a sudden, they kind of woke up when I put that stuff down. I think. That's because it was just this obvious green belt where, the animals were grazing that and everything else, but it was that green belt. So that was pretty encouraging. And ever since then, I've kind of focused or thought more and more about how do I get nutrient back on this stripped land that, someone took that away and exported it from a property at some point from poor farming practices. And so it's like, my job is now to somehow get this soil regenerated back into what it should be. And it, you can try and do that with mob grazing and like people talk about earthworms. Well, if you just graze right and do all this stuff, all these earthworms will come and magically make calcium available from what's in the soil. And, for a while I sort of well, maybe that's what I should do. I shouldn't put lime down or anything. But at this point, I'm like, man, maybe that does work, but it's going to take decades. Right now, the way our economy and everything is, it's like we have at our fingertips extremely cheap, ground limestone and rock powders and all these things that are what the soil needs right now. And so my thought now is to just focus on getting stuff and getting it down so that our soil has at least the base of what it needs for a long time in the future with good farming practices, so that if those things get to be more scarcely available, or who knows what's going to happen in the future, at least I'll have put down a base for what I need. So what we've been doing that has been showing great results so far has been, and kind of just by default, because we didn't have a barn. We now have a barn, but it's not quite finished. I hope we can get it finished for this winter, but we haven't ever had a barn to winter our livestock in, and so we've had to just outwinter them in our pastures. And so what I've done is kind of rotationally fed hay that I've bought in from other farms on our soils, and reading Jim Garish's book on Kick the Hay Habit and realizing how much fertilizer value there is in every bale of hay. I was like, this is a way that we have cows now, so we have a small herd of Dexter cows that we have for meat and maybe milk someday, but and we don't have the sheep anymore, or the geese or the pigs, but so I've been feeding the cows the hay, and I'm just seeing clovers and stuff just wake up everywhere when I feed 3 or 4 round bales of hay per quarter-acre paddock every year. It's like there's a lot of nutrient going down there. I mean, the cows are eating a lot, they're pooping out a lot, and there's a lot of just waste hay that then just is feeding the soil kind of stuff that it wants. And so that's been sort of my strategy for bringing nutrient in so far. And at some point, now that we have a barn, I'd like to start, keeping them in the barn more during wet periods of the winter, because my biggest problem with the feeding hay out in the pasture is just we have such heavy clay soils that when it gets really soupy, I mean, they're just making such a mess that I know it's just compacting the soil out there, and I don't feel 100% great about doing that every year, every winter, just doing that on all those pastures. So I'd like to be able to bring them up to the barn and feed them, and when it's on a kind of a heavy use pad or something where they won't compact the soil, and when it's dry enough or frozen enough, I can get them out there again. I might feed them out in those paddocks, but so yeah, I mean, basically at this point we are. Our almost entire farm income is just from the nursery, and then some I've been doing a little bit more consulting with some a few people, and then the livestock, the cows that we have, and we have just a dozen laying hens for our own use. Those are all just pretty much for our family's use, and we sell some of the excess to people. Just to make a little bit of money for feed and that sort of thing. So I mean, just to be clear that, we're not necessarily making our living from our silvopasture, but yet I feel like we need animals in that system to kind of help keep things cycling and keep the grass, mowed down and grazed, and grow high quality protein from grass that we can't eat ourselves. But in a sense, we are making a living from our silvopasture because all the trees that we have planted out in our silvopasture are all varieties that we also propagate for our nursery, and they're also out on trial for fruiting production and just see how they grow on different rootstocks on our soil in the silvopasture tree rows. So, in a way, even though we're not necessarily growing fruit for sale in our tree rows, at least not yet, they are very important and crucial to our nursery production. I mean, that's where I go get my cyanwood for grafting from. It's where I get seeds for starting rootstock for various things, and also we can kind of see which varieties are doing well and which varieties are not doing well. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'll end my answer
there. So. Wow, that's really neat. Thank you for the in-depth description of your farm and what all you're doing.
Yeah.
Sounds great. So I was looking at your website a little bit. It looks like you're selling quite a few different things in your nursery. Now, are those all things that you're growing out in your tree rows as well, or?
Almost all of them are, that we're trialing. I mean, everything that we sell through our nursery is potted plants at this point. So we're not growing any nursery stock in ground. I've kind of pushed for that a little more. My wife sort of says no. It's kind of interesting, you know. I mean, my big thing is like, oh, you know, we have to water these pots, and it's plastic pots, and we have to buy in, you know, we mix our own soil from pine bark, peat moss, compost, and then some various things to buffer the pH and add some nutrients to the mix. And but it's stuff we have to buy in, which is kind of a bummer. But the problem has been, like, you know, if you grow nursery stock in ground, you know, you can only sell that stuff at a very limited window in the year. And we find that a lot of our customers, you know, they might have wanted to buy bare root nursery stock, but they waited too long and it was too late, and they couldn't even order bare root anymore. And so they come to us, and we have stuff in pots there all summer long that they can buy and plant at any time of the year. And so it's kind of worked for us, and I kind of hesitate. I mean, I'd like to do in-ground stock because it seems more inherently sustainable. You know, we don't have to bring any products in, but yet at the same time, to make it convenient for people to plant their own trees, it seems like potted is kind of the way to go. And people generally have much higher success rates with potted plants. You know, there's not, you know, any like weird stuff about trying to make sure the plants, you know where the plant's normal depth is, where it's growing in the pot, whereas a bare root plant, it can be hard to find where the root ends and the top begins. And so I don't know, it's been a weird thing. And then, I mean, our farm has operated entirely on rainwater harvesting ever since we started. And so we're not pumping any groundwater up for our plants. We're not bringing town water in. We're just collecting off of all the roofs from our, you know, our new barn and our house. And, I mean, we are using electricity to pump to pressure and stuff like that. So it's not like it's some amazing zero input thing, but we've kind of figured out how to make rainwater work with adequate storage. And that's happened just because we don't have, town water doesn't even come out to us. We can't even tap into town water where we're at. And drilling a well would be probably, you know, anywhere from like $8,000 to $12,000. And I don't know, we're just like not real keen on that. It's like it requires a lot more electricity to pump water up from, you know, 130 feet down than it does from pumping it just, you know, 5 feet in the ground in a rainwater tank. So I don't know. I mean, it's one of the things that, like, I'm always kind of feeling like, man, I wish we could do more in-ground stuff and, you know, get away from potted plants. But at the same time, you know, we have clay soils, so we can't dig stuff. If it's really stopping wet, you know, we wouldn't be able to dig things for people. And I don't know. It's kind of interesting. But, yeah.
Yeah. Do you, out in your silvopasture, do you do a lot of watering with the water that you collect? Like, do you run the water out there?
We don't do any watering. We're pretty, it's been kind of interesting. You know, I find myself kind of torn between irrigation and no irrigation. I know that with irrigation, I mean, I've thought about setting up just drip tape out to our trees. And we actually just this fall, we finally buried a water line with pop-ups at every other tree row, mostly for our grazing animals. So we can, with quick connect, plastic quick couplers that we can pop in and tap into a gravity-fed rainwater tank system we have. And so we could now water trees if we wanted to very easily just from gravity flow. But I hesitate because, you know, it's interesting. So we planted most of our silvopasture in 2010, like the summer of 2010. And most of what we planted out were teeny tiny little whips that I had just grafted. Like I ordered rootstock, you know, 1/4-inch caliper rootstock, and I had grafted them, and I had like set them in a root cellar to kind of callus over. And then I just went and planted them very carefully, planted them out. I mean, like they hadn't even sprouted out yet from their top. But we planted them out, and we mulched well around each tree, and I think we put about 96 fruit trees out in our spacings that we had at 15 feet apart. And they grew. I don't think we watered them in when we planted them, but I think after that we didn't really water them at all. And the first 2 years were fine. I mean, we're not anything really weird with extreme drought or anything. But then 2012, our region had like a super severe drought. I mean, a lot of farmers got all these, crop insurance payments, or just payments for the drought relief and stuff. And I think we have a tank that goes on our pickup truck that we have, like, for if we ever need emergency water, we can drive to town and fill up like a 275-gallon tank on our truck for like $1.75 or something from town water. We can just drive in and you put the money in this little thing and it shoots your water into your tank. Most people do that to fill up pools and stuff, but we can get town water in a pinch if we need it. And so in the drought, I think we went out one time and we took like a day and we just drove into town, got a pickup full of water, and we went out and we have a little hose bib on our truck tank. And we went out and just kind of like parked our truck uphill and we just like watered each plant by hand kind of deeply with the hose because it was a drought and the trees were pretty small. They were only like 2 years old from little whips. And that's all we did. We did one watering in that drought, and we've never really watered the trees other than that. And we have not even reapplied mulch or anything. It's just they've been kind of, and we use a scythe or a weed eater or something to kind of trim around them and hack the weeds and stuff down. But it's interesting. Another friend of mine up in Bloomington had planted trees the same year that we did. They put everything on drip tape, irrigated them like perfectly, And in the drought, I don't know if their drip tape broke or what, but they lost a ton of trees to the drought. And what my mind kind of went to was that, and it kind of makes sense, and I think that, I've never looked up studies. I'm pretty sure there's been studies done about, when you water close to the surface fairly constantly with drip tape or any kind of irrigation, your plants are going to develop much shallower roots because they're wanting to like suck up that water, and they're never having to be forced deeper into the soil. And so my guess at what is going on is that our trees, because we didn't water them constantly, and they had to seek deeper into the soil profile for adequate moisture, and even when they were little, and so by not kind of babying them, so to speak, we kind of forced them to, be a little tougher and more resilient and go deeper for water. And I think that's probably why they got through that drought, even in their like third leaf or whatever. And so it's something that, I've set up drip systems for people that I've helped install orchards for. It makes a lot of sense for people that are putting something in. It's an easy way to water your plants if it's dry, and I want to see people succeed. But I always feel a little weird putting them in because I'm like, am I actually making these people get trees that are going to end up being much less resilient, like a lot more dependent on like just shallower rooted. So my compromise is I always just tell them, I say, don't turn your drip system on unless there's not been any rain for like a couple weeks. And then at the very when those times, water them really deeply, like once a week. No more than that. Don't do any like constant drip. Turn it on overnight. For one day a week until the rains come again. Because I don't know. I just think that it's worth encouraging trees to make deeper roots. I guess if you're running a commercial orchard and you have unlimited water. It probably makes total economic sense to just have drip lines going and you give them every bit of water that they need at any given time of the year. But we're operating in a kind of a different framework. And but yeah, and we've also chosen, and this may have been part of what the difference was between our trees and their trees. We've been very, very focused on using appropriate rootstocks for the trees that we plant. And I mean, for instance, M111 apple rootstock is I just cannot believe how well that rootstock does in our heavy clay soils. I mean, before I even put the nutrient down for these trees, the M111 trees and then the other rootstock we just absolutely love is Crimps 5 for sweet cherries. Those two rootstocks, which they're both known to do well in heavy soils. We've just seen them grow in like what they shouldn't be allowed to grow in. I mean, my only guess is they're reaching deep into the soil profile and tapping into nutrition that's farther down that has been stripped from the top, foot or two of soil. But so we've seen those do really well, and so we sell our trees. We encourage people to plant M111 and Crimps 5 and various other ones that definitely do better in clay than some of the other varieties that are out there, other rootstocks that are out there. So, part of what we're seeing too is maybe that we're using more appropriate rootstocks and they are more resilient and adaptable to the clay soils. So,
So I was wondering, are a lot of your trees starting to come into production now, and do you have any plans for like a pick your own or anything in the future?
Yeah, it's a really good question. They are now finally coming into their own. Again, we have really stripped soil. Even though I put some of that nutrient down, I still want to apply another batch of stuff, maybe some kind of manure or compost, because I think they could still benefit from it. So our trees have been a lot slower growing than most people would like to see. And I'm talking mostly the apples, peaches, pears, cherries, plums, those sort of the more traditional, I guess, conventional or traditional tree fruits. But they are now starting to come into bearing. Last year we got our first pretty decent apple harvest, and my thought from the very beginning of this planting, which is kind of interesting, I knew we had tried to grow organic apples and pears and traditional tree fruits back in our sort of tangly food forest setting that we had planted in our very beginning years starting the farm. And the first years they made amazing fruits, and we thought, oh, this is awesome. We're going to be able to get sellable quality fruit, and then as the years went on, more insects found their way in, and fungal disease and that sort of thing, and so we had less and less kind of sellable quality fruit. And now again, just remember that that was in time when we were not really looking at soil tests or anything too. So I always kind of wonder what if I had put down all the nutrients that they needed, would have we gotten better quality fruit from that? So I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see how the newer planting kind of does as we're adding more of that stuff. But so I kind of given up on the dream a little bit of being an organic orchardist and just selling organic fruit. That was kind of our original goal. It was start growing vegetables, figure out the fruits and get them going and get them established. And once they start producing, phase out of the vegetables and start selling fruit. And that was kind of our goal or our plan, basically. And then somehow, our nursery popped up, and that's really what was the transition was to the nursery. And it makes a lot of sense now that I think about it, but we never really planned for that to happen. And so my plan in planting all those trees out in the silvopasture system was initially just that, hey, number one, I want trees of any sort, at a certain spacing in our pastures so that the animals have shade. And the pasture has shade. It's kind of buffering the sort of baked short, grassland sort of syndrome if we're on a ridge top and we're just, really prone to drought and that sort of thing. So I wanted trees just for that, at the very bare minimum, by planting trees that I'm pretty sure will grow there, I know I'm getting shade eventually. And then the second thing was if all goes well, I'll also get fruit, and we can either, eat that ourselves or make it into jams or jellies or whatever, or we can feed it to the livestock that are rotating through the system. So my second step was okay, so number one, shade for sure. Number two, even if the fruit's totally wormy and gnarly and whatever, half rotten, pigs and cows are going to just chomp it down, and they're going to get something. They're going to get some nutrition off of that. I mean, I'm not kidding myself that they're going to get all their, carbs from apple fruit drops. I'm not stupid. So, but it was like, okay, so at the very worst, it's just shade. At the next best, it's like they'll make some fruit that us or the animals can eat if we want it. And we don't even have to like gather it and feed it to them because they'll be fenced right next to those trees. They'll be able to just kind of sweep them up as they go. And that was also part, there's some thought put into like, well, if they're eating the fruit drops that have like plum curculio or other pests that are embedded in those fruitlets, they're going to hopefully break at least a little bit of the pest pressure by, digesting all those little grubs and stuff that are in the fruitlets. And then number 3 was like, well, if, at the time we planted it, our nursery wasn't our full front, our primary income. We were still growing vegetables and some guinea hogs and some animals to sell breeding stock of. And but if number 3 was like, well, if all goes really, really well, we'll have sellable quality fruit that we can sell for a premium price. Not certified organic, but naturally grown fruit. And so it's kind of always a hope, that it's going to be just everything's perfect and hunky dory. And so we had those options, but now then since then our nursery has kind of come up as a really obvious main income source, and it's where most of our time goes. And so even if our trees all bore like beautiful, pristine, perfect fruits, I don't think we would want to sell them because we know what's involved in, packing them, storing them, getting them to the market, and sorting them, grading them. It's like I don't think either of us have any interest in becoming, orchardists and selling fruit at this point. I think they're, like you said, pick your own. That's something we've talked about. That if we do end up having like a lot of really good fruit, we might do something like that for people. And another aside that I won't get much into because it might take another half an hour to go through. But we've been doing a farm incubator program on our property, which has been pretty awesome. Where we invite a person or a couple to come and use our previous garden beds that we don't need anymore because we're not growing market scale vegetables, to start their own farm or try their hand at market gardening, to sell it somewhere and kind of do it the way they want and try it out without any like land investment, that kind of thing. But anyway, I think about, if we would end up getting a lot of fruit that's valuable that we don't have time to deal with, we could probably find somebody that would be interested in sort of, taking that fruit and finding a market for it. And we would probably get a little bit of a kickback or something from it, but mostly, I would love to see more organic local fruit going out to the market because there just really isn't much right now. And I say that we haven't sold anything. We did sell peaches are something that we ended up, it was like the last thing I thought would actually work because it's a soft fruit. I thought it was going to be totally prone to fruit rots, but I just love fresh peaches. And so I was like, I'm going to plant some peach trees and see what they do. And a Red Haven peach never makes it makes tons of peaches every year, but they completely turn to goo from insects and disease and rots and stuff. They're just so prone to so many things. But, we have a handful of other varieties that we planted at the same time, like Harrow Diamond and Reliance and Raritan Rose and Redskin have all done awesome. And I think that they just are a little more disease resistant and a little more insect resistant. They have a little bit more fuzz on them. And I think that has something to do with insect resistance. And so we were actually from like huge peach trees that were doing really well in our original plantings. We sold to a couple of local places, like, hundreds of pounds of peaches every year, organic, not certified organic, but naturally grown peaches. And that was pretty cool to actually do that. Like, we actually were able to take, and then they were nice, too. People liked them and they wanted more. Like, we graded them. So it's possible, but to answer your question, yes, we are starting to get some fruit. To be perfectly honest, too, because I really don't like to bullshit people. It's like my biggest pet peeve is people trying to claim stuff that they're actually not doing. But to be perfectly honest, like we just haven't had a whole lot of time to even deal with the fruit. So the past few years when we've had apples and stuff, I've gone out and picked like a shirt full or something to bring in to put in our fridge, and we eat them over the course of 2 or 3 weeks. But I just haven't taken the time or had the time to go out and just harvest the whole tree when it needed to be harvested. And we end up having all the fruits dropped in the ground, and the animals eat them up. So that's fine. But so we have had production starting, but it's not in full force yet, and not all the varieties. Our pears and sweet cherries have been the one which are also known to be the slowest to start producing. This year we had, a number of pear trees start making some crops that looked really good. I did harvest those and we ate those, enjoyed them. And the sweet cherries we're starting to do a little bit this year too. So one thing that's kind of interesting that I'll say, and it's pretty pertinent to what, silvopasture and realities of silvopasture, and any system that you're sort of planning at the outset. When we planted our silvopasture, we planted all just traditional tree fruits. I mean, we planted disease-resistant ones. We planted, used rootstocks that we thought would succeed well. We were paying attention to it, but we sort of thought, hey, let's do a more of a traditional fruit orchard for our silvopasture trees, because if they do fruit well, that would be a much more valuable crop than, say, like pecans or persimmons or pawpaws or that sort of thing. So, but in the meantime, as we've been sort of shifting our priorities of, well, we don't really want to even sell fruit at this point. We don't need like 30 apple trees, I mean, maybe we're going to make cider or something. But so now what we've been doing is been planting more, and also our nursery, we've been focusing a little more on, like, okay, so nut crops, they're a little more food value than fruits. Chestnuts can be starchy, and the other nuts can be oily and protein, and some of the stuff that is kind of nice to have as a backup, and to feed ourselves if we need to, and even livestock. And so we've been planting in nut trees between every fruit tree. We did a lot of that last year. And also just so like we have our silvopasture set up just for people's interest. We have set our silvopasture up in more species rows. We've kept, it's like one row is peaches, one row is 2 rows are apples, another row is cherries, another row, next 2 rows are pears. Different varieties of those mixed within, but we just thought for management and ease of mostly ease of management, ease of harvesting, we thought, let's just keep them species rows instead of just mixing everything up all over the place. And I'm really glad we did that. It does make pruning easier, it makes gathering scion a lot easier, kind of keeping an eye on the tree easier. But since we've sort of wanted to say, hey, we don't need this many apples, peaches, blah, 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 let's plant some other stuff that might be better food value, and we want to trial some other varieties for our nursery to see how they do, so we can sell them to people with confidence that they're actually decent performers in our area. So we planted more northern pecans in one row. We planted heart nuts in another row. We've planted sort of Russian source Persian walnuts in another row, and then a sort of improved Chinese chestnut seedlings in another row, and then the pecans I plan to graft onto. What we planted, almost all those were seedlings with the idea. Some of them are from improved parents, so we'll kind of see how they do with production and maybe cut out the ones that are poor performers or graft onto them. So yeah, I'm planning on, and have done some grafting on them already on some of the pecans, and putting some pecans and some pecans and some cultivar like shellbark hickories and shagbark hickories, some things like that I kind of want to get going on our place so we have scionwood. So we've been doing that, but then the other really interesting thing is that it's kind of one of those things about like watching nature and observing what's going on versus just slapping down a system that's not really that sensitive to the land. So our ridge, for some reason, and we're in the heart of American persimmon country. Like we're in like pawpaw persimmon, like the belt, like the persimmon belt or whatever you call it. And like everyone around here makes persimmon pudding, and it's just like they do stuff with persimmons, have pulp in their freezer. It's just kind of a local tradition. And for some reason, our ridge, like where our silvopasture is, and it may be because the soil was stripped so bad, is that persimmons are just really adaptable with their deep roots of gathering nutrients where other things can't. But I'd say like if we let our ridge go from mowing or grazing, that it would come up with about probably 80 to 90% American persimmons. It's just like there's all these root networks and root sprouts all over our fields. And I mean, when I'm bush hogging or pasture clipping after our animals have grazed to keep the trees from growing up in the pastures, I'm mowing off mostly persimmon sprouts, and they'll shoot up like, it's crazy. They'll shoot up like 6-8 foot growth in a single year, like from being mowed to the ground. It's nuts. They're just like they want to grow here. Yeah. And for years, and we have a nice little cluster of like 5 really like fully mature female persimmons. So like we have all our family can use just from that one little grove, and they're pretty nice big fruits. They're not grafted, but they happen to be pretty nice fruits. And so I never really had any motivation to plant grafted persimmons and like get into that at all. But at some point I realized that, holy cow, what wants to grow here is persimmons. Even in the strip soil, even without any nutrients added, what wants to grow here is persimmons. And here I go, and I've planted all these apples and pears and various things. And so like what I've done now, which has been awesome, and I've been really happy with it because I've been getting more into persimmons and realizing how amazing some of the improved cultivars are. And we'll be selling more through our nursery too, is I've let persimmon sprouts come up in the row, like in the line of the row of the tree rows. Wherever they come up, I let them grow for a year or two. And then I come back in the spring and I graft onto them with all this interesting persimmon scionwood that I trade people for or get from local friends who are persimmon breeders. And it's just slowly kind of morphing. So, I mean, potentially in, 10 or 20 years, I mean, our silvopasture may be mostly persimmons. I'd like to have nut trees in there, at least a few apples and a few things just for our own use. But the more I think about it, like we had an experience feeding our hogs one time that were on pasture. We had, I think, 2 or 3 lactating sows that had piglets on them nursing. So that's like the highest nutrient demand you need in any class of animal, of a hog. And we had fenced those nursing moms and their babies into the paddock that has that grove of American persimmons in it that are females that make nice fruits that I was telling you about earlier. So we had them in that section, and then at the very west edge of our silvopasture, we have a little strip, like probably 20 or 30 foot wide strip that's at our property edge. And it happens to have like almost all like huge. I mean, we're talking like most of them are probably about like 20-inch diameter DBH oaks and hickories. There's some black oaks, some red oaks, some chestnut white oaks, and then some just regular white oaks, and then a couple of different hickory species. And they all drop tons of nuts every year. So we put the males, which were not that many males. There were like some who were grown up for meat, and a few young ones that we were selling to keep intact as boars, and then our 1 or 2 mature boars in the acorns and hickory nut section. And we thought, from everything we read, we're like, okay, so the nut, those boars are going to be the best. Like they're going to be the ones that we don't have to feed any corn to. They're going to get all their diet from foraging for these nuts. And we thought, the females are in with the persimmons, but that's not going to be that much of their food. They're just fruits. And we were limit feeding all of our pigs. We didn't have self feeders. We just gave them like a wet mash that we sort of fermented. And so we were giving the same mash to both of them, but we found that like the females with their nursing babies that were in with the persimmons, like they would eat like a few bites of the mash and then they would just like walk away, which is like super weird if you've ever had pigs, like for them to just walk away from feed. But anytime a persimmon would drop, they'd run over there and gobble it up. They'd hear it smack and they'd run over there and gobble it up. And meanwhile, the group of boys, the pigs that were in the oaks and hickories, I mean, they were gobbling the feed down. It was like they needed a lot of feed, and they're not even nursing anything. Some of them were growing and stuff, but what I kind of gathered, number one with the persimmons, I think that it's not being talked about much yet, but I think people talk about acorn finished or chestnut finished pork. I'm like, screw that. Like persimmons are it's like giving like a bag of candy goo. It's like pure carbohydrates that are readily available. There's no like crunching up of a shell. There's like no fiber hardly. It's kind of like drinking soda or pop, like like the problem with American diet, is obesity. It's like, but if animals, that's kind of a good thing. So my thought is just that persimmons are just crazy dense with carbohydrates. And, it's like, man, that's probably a really, really good forage for hogs. We've had cows and sheep just not be that excited about them. I've tried to feed them to, like, take them over to sheep or take them over to goats or to cows that we've had, and they'll sort of lick at them a little bit, but it's like they kind of don't like them. And I mean, I'm kind of thinking that if they'd be in with them when they were fully ripe, that they would probably gobble them up or learn to like them, I think, once they realized the carbohydrates and stuff they had in them. But anyway, at least for hogs, I think it's something that's not really being talked about, but something that is got incredible potential for fattening hogs in the winter and before the winter. So anyway, I guess that kind of gives you a little bit of picture, I guess, of our silvopasture rows. And so now some of those persimmons are coming into production, and I mean, we have one tree right now of a hybrid American Asian persimmon cross called Rosayanka. It also goes by the name Russian Beauty. It's a trademark name that we don't use. And it is just loaded. It's still hanging with fruit, and they're huge. They look great. I'm excited about that. And when we got to trial a few other of the improved crosses that I had never really had before that I've gotten signed from people for. Some of Jerry Lehman's persimmons. Got to eat some of those that were just huge and really nice. And then the great thing, there's a guy locally that, there's all these people out there doing amazing breeding work that nobody knows about. It's just such a shame. But there's a guy local here who's been a mentor of mine. His name's Don Compton. And he is just, I'm convinced he's one of the foremost persimmon breeders in the country, but almost nobody knows about him because he's not out there promoting himself. But he has about 1,500 hand crosses of persimmons, of seedlings that he's planted out that are about 20 or 25 years old right now, and he's just getting all these interesting results from his breeding work. And so we've been grafting a lot of his persimmons. A lot of them are Miller crosses, and it's absolutely amazing, some of his stuff. And so we're actually selling some of those to people, and we have his name attached to it, so he gets credit for the work. And I just hope to be able to like help introduce and get some of these people that no one really knows about out there. So hopefully through a nursery we can kind of get some stuff out to the world that'll spread and people figure out what it is. And anyway, so.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I really appreciate your time this evening.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting.
Yeah.
Real quick, I was just kind of curious, do you rotate your animals through different paddocks? And also I was wondering about all the different animals that you've tried, which one do you feel has really worked the best in your silvopasture system?
Yeah, I can. That's great. I can probably actually give a fairly succinct answer to that one. So yes, we do rotate. I've always been very, very keen on rotating animals. So our hogs, I mean, we've always done, anywhere from like 1 to 3 or 4 day rotations, depending on how much forage is in a paddock. And so we use electric net fencing for the sheep and for the geese, and then the hogs we just use like 1 or 2 wires low down on like little step-in posts of poly wire. And then the cows that we have now, which are are pretty much our only grazers that are in the system now, we just use 1 strand of poly braid wire to fence them in step-in posts. Cows are just the hands down the easiest. I mean, you may not get as many babies a year from them, and they take longer to grow out to their butcher size. But as far as respecting the electric fence, as far as being able to be kept in with a single wire, it's just, I mean, the pigs would be kept in with a single wire, but if they happen to flip a bunch of soil up onto that wire, they give themselves their own gate that they can just walk over the wire. And they're a lot more cunning and ready to risk getting shocked to make sure that they can see whether the fence is on or not. I feel like they're like really quick to get out when the fence would get, if we had like the electricity off or something like that. So yes, I feel like cows are totally the easiest species to graze. And part of that, I'd say that we ended up getting rid of sheep mostly because we had parasite problems. It was really disappointing to me because we were rotating 3 different species in a very linear rotation after each other with the idea of cleaning up the parasite load and all this other stuff that people make exorbitant claims over. And I think a lot of it's bullshit. I don't think it's nothing, but the reality is, I think in our humid, hot Midwest climate, it's like the small ruminants like sheep and goats are just so prone to parasites that, I mean, no matter what you're doing, you're probably going to have some problems with parasites. We have a friend that's doing St. Croix sheep that are supposed to be just all super resistant to parasites, and he's having some problems too. And so it came to a point where I was like, am I going to let my animals suffer because I want to like not give them synthetic chemicals, or am I going to give them Cydectin or Ivermectin or whatever it is to worm them when they get bottle jaw and they're going to die in like a week if I don't do anything. And so in the end, I was like, what? I don't like giving synthetic wormers to animals, so I'm going to get rid of the sheep and try cows. And cows just, my opinion about why cows we've just never needed to worm them. Like we've sent stool samples in, they just are naturally more resistant to worms, at least for now. My opinion on why that is that I think sheep and goats, like the small ruminants, I think historically they've been wormed on a schedule for more decades than cows have been. I think people saw results, and it was an economic obvious thing to do even back in the 70s and stuff. And so I think what ended up happening is people were able to kind of artificially prop up the genetics of the small ruminants with wormers, and they were selecting just for growth and maternal characteristics and conformity and that kind of stuff. And there was absolutely zero selection based on parasite resistance going on. Whereas cows, in the meantime, not that many people were worming their cows on a schedule through that period. And so the ones that were kind of wormy and crappy growers and stuff like that and always had the runs from heavy worm loads just kind of got called out of the herd. Or at the very least, people made notes about, this one always needs to be wormed with the wormer twice a year when we get them up, and so we're going to not save that one for seed stock. So, I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know if that's actually what's going on or not, but it kind of makes sense to me. And all I know is that of the various breeds of cows that we've had, and I was running like a 65 head grass-fed beef herd with a friend down the road on 230 acres for about 4 years. And so the same thing happened with them. I mean, it was like, that was a bigger herd. And there was times in the spring where they had pretty runny stools and stuff, and I'd take stool samples in, and it was like the vet said, "Oh, I wouldn't bother worming them," which is like, well, that means they're pretty clean because the vet's going to want you to worm them. So I think it was all just spring kind of washy forage that they were kind of shooting through them, and that's why they had runny stools. So yeah, my thing is cows are just awesome. I mean, if you want to do chickens or poultry, I mean, we've run those through too. Geese were actually pretty good. We still had to fence them out of the trees. I will say, in case anybody is listening, don't assume that you can use geese as weeders for woody crops. They will totally shred the bark on your young trees. We've learned that by hard experience. So great for weeding strawberries, but don't use them to weed your like nursery stock, or you'll have a bunch of girdled trees. They just get bored, and I think they like to mouth on stuff. And so when they have this like hard stick to chew on, they like to just chew on that stick all day. So we came out and had some of our young apples that we had just planted just completely gummed by the goose bills all around them. So but yeah, so I don't know. I think that's I'd say cows are great. They're expensive to buy and take long to grow, but man, they're so easy. So
yeah. And then, do you have any what are the best ways that you found to protect young trees out in your pasture?
That's a great question. It's one of those ones that everybody has a different answer for too. So I'll give you my answer, and with a caveat that I don't know everything. I don't know that it's the answer for everybody, but we have never put tree tubes or trunk guards or anything on our trees. And I think it's just, and we have pretty heavy deer pressure. I mean, we see deer walking out in our field all the time because we're surrounded by woods. And I think my best guess, the only thing that makes any sense to me is that the deer don't like they can kind of sense and smell the domestic livestock rotating through a system, and it's like they don't want to get in there that readily because of that. And the only reason I kind of say that is that we had a period where we didn't have any livestock rotating through our silvopasture. It was after our oldest daughter is 8 years old, and the second, what was supposed to be our second kid, turned into 2 magically, and we had twins, and those first years were just crazy. So we got rid of all of our livestock except for chickens, because we just needed to simplify and hunker down and just survive. So during that time, we had no animals out there rotating. And after 1 year of that, we started seeing some serious deer pressure. I mean, bucks rubbing the crap off of a lot of our sweet cherries that were already getting pretty big and nice, browsing off things. We had deer coming right up to our back door and munching on blueberry plants. We watched them out our back window. And so we know we had the deer pressure, but it was like all of a sudden when the livestock was gone from the system, the deer started moving in. And so the only thing I can say is I think it's either the livestock were there, or the fact that there was electric fence being moved around and not stationary where they could kind of make sense of it and kind of just jump over it and work with it. So I don't know. I mean, I think that has been our deer protection strategy. That, and also having a dog that is outside at night. And I mean, we have dogs out here. We don't have to leash our dogs. And we have a dog that is outside at night, actually outside most of the time. And, so when they hear stuff rustling out, nearby, they're going to go bonkers and bark and go run after it. So I think that helps as well. But I don't think it's necessarily just one of those strategies, but probably a combination. If I would, the things I recommend to people that I've planted orchards for, They don't want to get trunk guards for every tree, which I know they're also kind of a hassle. And my biggest problem with tree tubes and trunk guards is just that you don't get to see your tree growing. You don't really get to see what it's doing. You don't know if the graft has failed. You don't know if weeds are coming up in there and taking over the tube. I think it's a great strategy for deer in a really broad acre, hands-off kind of situation. I think it's just what you kind of have to do. But what I recommend to people is just set up a very simple, 2-wire electric fence system with just step-in posts. It's very simple, kind of semi-permanent electric fence on either side of your tree rows, so that there's only about a 3 or 5 foot kind of bed between your two electric fence rows. And I think, my strategy behind that is just that, no matter what kind of fencing you do for deer, they're almost always going to get over it. If you're fencing a huge field, people always try and fence their whole field or whole planting in against deer. And it's when you give a deer this huge area that they want to get into, they're going to find a way to get into it. But if you fence right on either side of your tree rows with either hard fencing or electric fencing, it's such a narrow swath that they can't really jump into that area. They either have to try and browse between the fence wires, which, I think they could probably figure that out and do that somewhat. But, you're not going to get you're not going to get any bucks rubbing because they're going to get their necks shocked. And so I think having a narrow one single rows of trees fenced on either side with a 1 or 2 strand of electric fence it's what I would do if I were doing anything on a little bigger scale and wanted to make sure that they were protected. So we also have really liked there's and for clients that have that want things to look kind of nice. We have been pretty happy with A.M. Leonard has these pretty thick hard plastic mesh tree guards that are black, and they're hard enough that they protect against weed eaters as well as deer and rabbits and stuff. And they kind of go on like a tree tube. They're slit on one side, so you can kind of pop them on and just use zip ties. But what I like about them is you can still see the plant growing. You can still see the tree growing with those, and they also don't look like a big white plastic thing in the landscape. And they let the trunk breathe and that kind of thing too. So those are pretty nice. They're a little bit pricey, but they have been pretty amazing and have lasted a long time for us. I bought a few just to kind of try out to see how they do. But yeah.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time and
yours too.
Really, really good. A lot of really good information.
Great.
Some people are really going to appreciate this, and
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I'm happy to share.
So if they're interested in learning more, they can. Your website is at brambleberryfarm.com. Is that right?
Brambleberryfarm.org actually.
.org. Okay.
Yeah, .com was already taken, so we had to go with .org. And we do try and do a lot of education and stuff too. So it kind of fits a little bit. But yeah, please contact. And if you want to call, my number. I'm happy to give my phone number out too. So it's 812-723-5259. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, thank you too for your time. I know you're volunteering. I love the work the Savanna Institute is doing. It's awesome, and I hope someday to make it to one of your guys' conferences. If I could just get my butt off the farm or something like that. So, thank you for your time as well.